Hey, Grias, welcome back to Lex Gria's podcast. I'm your host, Alexis, and tonight is another true crime case. And before we get started, some details in this case may be disturbing to viewers, so viewer discretion has been advised. So, where does this case start? It starts in the town of Courtland, Mississippi, about a 19-year-old teenager girl whose life was fell short after being burned alive in her own vehicle and was trying to say her killer's name to law enforcement and fire department right before she was sent to the hospital fighting for her life and unfortunately did not make it. But now the mystery stays where the question of who name was it and who killed her. And for now, the answer is being presented with one person as the main suspect and was charged, but due to the missing pieces in the case, nobody has been convicted with her murder and it still is unsolved, but and has not yet delivered the justice for her family. Today we are speaking about Jessica Chamber. And who was exactly Jessica Chamber? Jessica was a teenager who was described by family members that said that she had a smile that would light the room up when she came by. She was a people's person who loved everybody and never seen a color in a person. So, what I mean by that, she was a person, how I would describe it to you guys, as a person who was diverse. She had black friends and boyfriends, including ones that was incarcerated. During this time of her death, quoted by her family, as well as due to the circumstance of the case of what transpired, her family members describe as Jessica would hate how racial divided the town has become after her death. She was a former cheerleader at a high school football game. She was a flyer. But at the age of 16, like most of us, she stopped wanting to be a cheerleader, and her aunt described her as being rebellious. And she didn't want to nobody telling her what to do. That's like any of us during that age, to be honest. And she can do and cannot. I feel like that was most teenagers, to be honest, because at that age, you're trying to figure out what you like or what you don't like. And in a sense, a phase where you're just trying to enjoy life before it gets serious. Because let me tell you, I'm in my mid 20s and life is serious right now, but in a good way, of course. But besides that, she was a free spirit, a loving to everybody around her, and always smiling. And she was obviously beautiful. So now we can see who Jessica was leading up to her tragic death. So let's begin with the facts and the timeline of events leading up to her death during the holidays. So let's start with Chamber became friends with a man known as Quentin Tellis, who she met during Thanksgiving and the only knew each other about 2 weeks before her death. And during this time, the beginning of December, there was phone data text message exchange with both Jessica and Quentin starting on December 2nd. Chambers goes to the emergency room for some medicine where Quentin accompaniment like essentially is there with her, and based on his own admission and by confirmed telephone data by the FBI and stuff. The next day, Chambers' text shows Tillis asking for sex for the first time, where he texts her, "I'm horny." And she replies, "Oh Lord." And the conversation continues, and she points out that his family would freak out, which prosecutor states that Jessica would not go to his house while the family was there. So on December 4th, Chambers has a broken screen on her phone and is making some conversation unclear. She receives another text message from him saying the same thing, and she replies previously, "Oh Lord." On December 6th, Chambers asks through text for funds for food and responds once more, now with a sexual proposal. And she explains to him she only needs $6. Minutes later, on the M&M gas station, surveillance camera shows Tillis walking across Chambers' car, where it has to view them walking back to the drive-thru. At 12:32, 10:04 a.m., Tillis is making a call that is bouncing off the phone towers, and where based on the tower's analysis, it shows that his phone is pinging is either stating that he's across the street from the gas station like previously or at his house. So right now I'm explaining to you guys leading up to the final date. So the other t- dates are based off of their conversation and what was going on in between that. So you kind of get like a perspective of like what his intentions was and kind of like where this conversation was leading to and what was happening. So this is where I'm going to describe to you a series of timestamps as well as times of what was happening during that time. And this is where I want you guys to put your detective hats on because it is about to get real. I promise you. So at 8:55 a.m., it shows him walking again back to the gas station getting breakfast. So right now I'm just describing of like where his whereabouts were and where her whereabouts were so they can kind of see what was going on. And at 9:01 and 9:02, Chambers wakes up and sends a text shows that she is home in Carlis Road. At 9:06, Tillis is leaving the house with his mom's white Chevrolet Suburban and heads to US 51. At 10:04, Chambers receives a call from Tillis, which only lasts for 69 seconds. And 10:08, Chambers is found making a purchase at the gas station. 10:09, Tillis texts her, "I'm ready." 10:10, she is seen again on the gas station talking to two acquaintances. No one else is with her. She is seen leaving and pulling off Tellis his driveway where she is headed south of US 51. 10:15 through 10:47, Chambers and Tillis is driving in circles on Courtland back roads. So between this time, Chambers is calling Kesha Myers and doesn't answer at first, and she doesn't answer. She calls Myers and they pick her up, and Tellis calls his sister. Quita Chambers drops Tellis off at the gas station, and she and Myers leaves. So Laquita's is Quentin's sister. At 10:55, Tillis walks back to the gas station with different clothes this time, and he is now wearing black shoes and a lighter pants and hat with a plaid coat. At 11:05, 5:29 p.m., there's exchange of text messages between Chambers about meeting up and getting something to eat. So this is where I circle back to the conversation where she says she wanted to get something to eat and she needed some money. While at first Tillis is asking Chambers once again, he needs her and wants some loving, and her response is the same that we stated. And Jackson, who I actually did not know about, was his girlfriend at the time, asking for money to come see him, and he's trying to meet up with Chambers. For what we see now, he wants sex, even though he's wording it differently, and it seems like she's curving it off at this time. And he's home, and Chambers is trying to get in contact with Myers. And then around close to 30 minutes to 5 p.m., Chambers only agrees to go get food if he pays. Another short phone call conversation, this time 33 seconds. This time around 5:08, 5:11, Tillis can be seen at the gas station with the same clothes, but this time he's pacing inside and stands outside, but doesn't get anything. At 5:12 p.m., Tillis is now walking south, and it's dark now. 5:20 p.m., he calls Chambers, no answer, but then she calls back. 5:24, 5:30, security camera shows Chambers at the gas station. This time, she talks to someone off the view from the camera, then goes to her car to pump gas. 5:29, both cameras and phone records show Chambers making a call to Tillis, and she pulls out and heads out to south down US 51. At 5:34, Tillis calls Chambers back. This was the last call he will make the next 48 minutes. He explains to investigators back in January 2016 that he was calling her to get a ride. And around 6 p.m., Chambers' phone shows she is on her way to Batesville. At 6:04 to 6:11, her phone shifts towers that covers the tower. Taco Bell Tillis said they were going to get something to eat. Based on her phone, it confirms that her being in that area. So essentially, there's no suspicious whereabouts of her phone data being anywhere. So that alibi is confirmed based off of phone data. At 6:17, Tillis calls the sisters where during this time the phone switches towers during the call. It only texts and call by Tillis between 5:24 and 7:42. And 6:22, 6:25, Chambers is still trying to reach Myers. At 6:30, cell phone data shows them going back to Courtland and hanging out near Tillis' house, which is south of M&M gas station, and confirms to investigator that he was in Chambers' car. At 6:41, she is still trying to get a hold of Myers. 6:48, Chambers makes her last call she would ever make with her mother, where her mother described it was quiet, which she found unusual, where she assumed she was with someone, which she indeed was. She was with Tellis. At 6:49, 7:26, neither phones are being used, and during this time, 5 women were trying to contact Tellis, which to me that just does not rub off. And one to be Jackson. At 7:10, a vehicle can be spotted leaving his resident, which was his uncle. 7:26, headlights appears and leaves the driveway next to Tillis' house. Security cameras is too grimy and dark to see what car is what. At 7:29, video shows Tillis' mom's vehicle leaves the house and goes to the M&M gas station and stays there for 20 minutes. 7:30, Chambers' cell phone pattern shifts dramatically west. Then she's on the scene on Harran Road. 7:42, he leaves a voicemail to Chambers' phone during this time, and he tells investigator when interviewed he told them his girlfriend was coming to town, but when to confirm the alibi, he switched his story and said it was Jackson. 7:46, he calls Jackson and says that he's going to be borrowing his sister's car. Investigator noted that there was a cut near where Chambers was found, subdivision towards Tillis' sister's house, where later her keys were found in that yard. But there is no communication with him asking his sister about borrowing the car. At 7:46 and 8, his phone goes silent. 7:50, 7:52, a car pulls up into his driveway to the storage shed, and it remains there for a minute and 42. Later on, the investigator Tillis tells FBI agents that he keeps a 5-gallon tank in the shed. So right there, you kind of got like he's putting himself in burning water or boiling water at this point. It's definitely giving something. At 7:52, the vehicle leaves the shed. At 8 o'clock, a car matched his sister can be passing by the gas station at a high rate speed towards Batesville, where Tellis told agents that he was trying to get a green dot car to send to Jackson so she can visit. 8:04, Chambers' last phone communication ever with the phone tower states that her phone essentially shut off due to it being too hot. So this is the assumption that this is a time that her car was caught on fire. That's just my assumption. 8:07, this is when the first 911 call came in about a vehicle being caught on fire. That LaTroy Rudd and Glenn Williams, who seen the burning car and called 911. This is shortly after where the unthinkable happened, where Jessica is walking towards the firefighters unrecognizable with just her underwear and 93% of her body burned. She's asking for help, and this was at 8:09, 8:15. So essentially, or 8:15 p.m. to 8:23 is when the phone ping confirmed that Tillis was heading to Piggly Wiggly for the cash card and he called Jackson 5 times during 8 p.m. to 8:23. So we know that around roughly 8:07, maybe 8:09, around 8 maybe is when her car was set on fire. But they are saying between 4:25 to 7:45, no phone calls were made between her and Tillis, which I'm referring to Jackson because was his phone like essentially pinged at Piggly Wiggly around that time frame. In the video, and Fred, he is wearing the red outfit, but this time no jacket. So he's obviously changing his clothes like numerous times during the evening time. And again at 8:57, he is seen with different clothes, and he tells the investor that he went to shower. After he was going back to the M&M, he hears the news about Chamber. And days following, he admits to deleting messages, content, and calls between the two. That right there, I feel like that's suspicious because I understand if someone has passed and you were the last person to be there, but if you legitimate didn't have anything to do with this girl's death, you would not do all that extra stuff because the FBI and police can backtrack that. This is where they ask, who did this to you? And this is the burning question that firefighters and other at the scene of were saying different names and could not confirm what was really said between Derek or Eric. So mind you, they're trying to figure out what happened with who did this to her essentially, because she is like burned. When I say burn, like 93, that's high volume right there. So who did this and what she said. And that's where the person in interest was later tried in court and being charged with capital murder. But the ongoing battle of what the name she said doesn't match the person on trial, because one side feels like he didn't do it and the other side is just trying to pin, and another side feels like he may have done it, but due to what transpired in court of how some things were put in play to place him with her close to her death, but then another side shows something else. So, this is how people came to divide what to see in both sides. So right now I'm like describing like the environment after the person of interest was being charged, and how like the court was saying some key points, like both sides, prosecutors and defense. So it's like, this is why I say this case is not like an open shut case, but it's leaning towards one person. But then in all honesty, it doesn't matter because there was a young girl's life cut short in a horrible manner. So we have to keep that in mind. And of course, we want the right person to be charged and for the family to get justice. But due to the evidence, it seems to be an open and closed case. And that wasn't the case and would lead to mistrials. But due to this person's history and what happened next, shows us a different side. So let's begin with the people on the scene and what professional experts from the court had to say. We started with the medical side. So on the scene where she was getting aid, the first responders asked if Eric did this to you. And according to testimonies, she replied with what it sounded like no. But based on doctors testified, they said she would not been able to accurately distinguish words at that time. But based on the degree of her injuries, the question that does not need to be clarified was she was able to talk in small words at all when considerably her airways burned close to her mouth and her lips and her tongue. So they're essentially saying that because she was burned so severely, she wouldn't be able to even say words. So they were arguing that would she even be possibly able to say words, or would she be able to not say words? So it's kind of unclear because of her inhaling gasoline. And also, Jessica was airborne to Mississippi, or Memphis. I said Mississippi. Memphis Hospital, where her family met her during this time. And her late mother and stepmother to stand by her side before she passed. And that's where the question lingers: who did this? During this time, investigators was heading on to check every Eric and Derek in town, even the ones in nearby counties. But nobody has any ties to her and no contact with either names. And during this time, Jessica's boyfriend was in prison and was thinking he had something to do with her by hiring a hitman. But the demeanor coming from him seemed genuine, which he was eventually clear, as well as the people that had similar names to the two claims, she said. And this is where the person whose investigators were looking into more, Quentin Tellis, the one that I mentioned earlier about his whereabouts and stuff, a gang member who also from Courtland, who was the last person to be with her the same day she died, according to cell phone and witness testimonies, where he lied numerous times before admitting to it. And I think, like, if you think about it, just thinking of just like the grass of this crime as well as where they're located, I can see why someone would be scared. But then at the same time, if you didn't do anything, you would do all means to help this person, even if the family didn't like you or maybe they didn't really know about you. But I would be a good person to like let someone know, like, hey, this happened. But if I didn't see anything, I can't like help you with that. And that's where obviously interrogation and stuff and pinning someone on something because you don't have any clues is where I feel like the law enforcement goes wrong on that. So, but based off of his background, it kind of just lingers. But they did also talk to his gang, who he was affiliated with, Ford, saying they had no problem with her and no parts of killing her. So essentially, they're saying because just because he's in this, but we didn't do this because like just be mindful of where they're at, like that's like I would say in a way, if you describe this, if this was something where it was consider not only murder but other charges, then that's where, the evidence would make the punishment even harder. So the night Jessica died, their cell phone pings the passenger seat was laid back, just how he described it in court testament. He was begging for sex, which she blew him off, and only knew each other for 2 weeks. But due to his alibi not matching where he was at that night, she was killed. For this case to be still unsolved, while now the suspect is in jail for another case about a young lady who was murdered until this is seen using her credit card and was charged and found guilty for the card use but not for the murder, and won't be released until another year or two. So like we're talking about right now, not back in that time. But as of right now, he is still considered the prime suspect until now. The case is still remain open and is awaiting for justice in the future for justice for Jessica. So when this case I first saw on like a doc series, and then I kind of was trying to get more information about it and trying to follow up with what was going on in court. And it was, like I said, what I just mentioned about how divided they were in court and everything, and how the family saw it one way and another family saw it another way. Because on one end, both families want justice for Jessica. They know that this family is grieving, but then also you have this person on trial whose name they said that she said, but that doesn't match with Quentin. So obviously, like, if you're the defense lawyer, you're going to add that in court. And then on top of that, with the cell phone pings and stuff, there was some, I think, there was something in regards of the way that they were tracking it. It wouldn't be accurate, I guess, during that time. But we're in the 20th century. Like, electronics and like technology is advanced. This wasn't the 80s, this was in the 90s, this was in the 70s, this was in the 60s. So it's kind of like, I can see your point on that, but then at the same time, like, if something seriously went wrong where it might, like, not saying anything other than this being a murder, but if something happened where someone did do something not in a way where it was, first degree or second degree or whatever, how they classify it, is just like that's where the law enforcement needs to look into it more. And I feel like this case has been sitting since the second mistrial because they technically can't do anything because he's in jail right now, or they're probably not doing anything, maybe until after he gets out. But I feel like this this case needs to be heard, and for that reason that's why I chose this case, because I want to shed light on a universal side and not just talk about just one case and then move on to a whole different spectrum. So I kind of wanted to get that similarity of cases where you have families that are seeking for justice, and also you have cases where it seems like it's considered closed, but it's not. And therefore, I want to close out this episode, and I hope that you guys enjoy this episode. And I thank you again for tuning in on Lex Ria's podcast. And I'm your host, Alexis, and I will try my best to be back on next Monday. It's just like since I've dwelled into true crime, it's a lot more preparation. But bear with me, and I hope that you guys enjoy this episode. And again, if you haven't listened to the first true crime episode of Keith Warren, that one is definitely something I will probably keep you guys updated, as well as this one. So with these true crime cases, I'm not going to just talk about it and then just keep going. If there's any updates that you guys have about it or have anything in the comments, let me know. And the timeline and stuff, I will give you guys the source on the links below. If you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, I do not know how to do that just yet, but there are a couple of links that I use for this episode, including the timeline. So as well as on the doc series. You can also look on Oxygen. And for now, and I hope you guys tune in for next week's episode. For now, good night, and thank you for listening.